We heard of these things called senescence or zombie cells. These senescence cells are basically, when you look at the chromosome, when you do like this RNA, DNA replication, and then you do this mitosis, cell division, and they make their actual tissue. These cells go into the state of what we call senescence, where the RNA stops replicating into DNA because of that thing called telomeres. And we all know about telomeres. Telomeres, when they shorten, they basically stop the replication and then stops that mitosis, cell division. What we need to do is have a signal that turns that thing on, and maintaining that signaler would be great.
Welcome to the Richer Soul podcast, where we share how to live in harmony across health, wealth, time, relationships, and spirituality. How do you bring them all together to live your ultimate life? The best thing is we've got nothing to sell, just great advice from people who've succeeded and lived that dream. Welcome to Richer Soul, Dr. Tommy Rhee. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, thank you very much for this invite, and I love talking to you and your guest.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I was the typical immigrant family. So coming from a third world country, my dad was a surgeon. So, we had it better than others, but we still, when we came from another country to the United States, it was that type of that level of income where you're starting off fresh as an immigrant. So it was tough at first, but as a kid, you enjoyed everything. Every adversity that adults talk about, it's like an enjoyment to you. Because this is fun. We're all living. It's like a big tent in one room. We're all living together. So it was growing up in that world. I was born in Malaysia, and then my dad was a surgeon there, and we came to the United States, and I was 3 years old, and we arrived in Chicago. And like a foreign doctor that comes to America, they have to go through their curriculum classes to get re-credentialed and a license here in America. So with that, and my dad doing, I think, some type of job that's underpaid back in the early 70s. We're barely getting by. I think we were right by Chicago. I think it's Chicago General Hospital, something in the bad part of Chicago. So that was my first introduction to America, into the ghettos there. Thinking this is normal. This is America, I guess. Okay, well, so that's my introduction. We were family, normal family. Mom, dad, had two sisters, and we grew up. And like anything else, it was amazing. I don't remember money an issue because they just knew how to save. They didn't, spend money. I guess everybody in my generation, we know our parents knew how to save money and how to spend it correctly, instead of where now everything is based on credit, right? You can buy everything right now and worry about it later. So I was amazed by my dad and mom with that low income world buying a piano and a violin for me as I was growing up, and be introduced to music. And I think that was the start of everything, how to be good in practicing and repetition and just practicing music. So it was like a normal, if you want to take that ABC after school special Asian family movie, that was me right there. So
Did they teach you how to save, or did you just notice it by watching?
I think it's by watching. You just mimic them because you're just doing what they're doing. So everything they get in, you're really watching your spending and understanding that you don't live in the present, you live in the future, and you try to push yourself out there. So I just see what they're doing. Of course, as a kid, you go, I want, but they tell you, hey, do you want it or do you need it?
So you learned the lessons and applied them.
Yeah. It's one of those things that's kind of bred into you as a young child. If you see it, you just mimic it and it becomes a habit. And then, you try to adapt more into what you think is better, but that's a good foundation for me.
No, I think actually, I shouldn't say that. Depends on where they're immigrants from. Asian immigrants tend to have that type of mentality of saving and doing that and figuring a way out. But it's also cultural there too.
Yeah. Definitely culture. I see my cousins, everybody, we're all basically the same.
Did they teach you how to negotiate? I wasn't sure if that's as much in the Malaysian culture or not.
I don't know. I think negotiation is I think maybe when I was younger, I remember, I don't know about other people, but I always I feel like I was that kind of person, to push the envelope, right? So you're trying to maneuver a direct course of asking for something, then go indirectly, creating that reasoning why you need to get that toy or that whatever you want to get. And then, when they are you're trying to get them to say yes by, I guess nowadays it's like a salesman's, his motto is 5 no's. And that's still a yes to me. So continue on to find that yes. So I think that's what, as a kid, you just attack that angles.
I think kids naturally do that. They don't know when to stop.
They don't know when to stop.
which is good.
But I think when they start like discovering their thought process and explaining why they want something, that's part of negotiation. They just need to learn how to switch it by saying I want it and figure out what they want, and then you can do that kind of manipulation with that conversation. Goes, no, this is what you want. You want to buy me a toy. Remember?
Yeah, usually that doesn't work so well. So, what inspired you to get involved in medicine?
Well, my dad was a surgeon, and growing up, you're in that world. You're seeing it. You're seeing my dad take care of patients and just really caring for them. And then I was an athletic person, so I like sports. And then those two, they marry you so well together. And then you start seeing that I can't play. I'm not that big of a player, so I know that I'm not going into the professional world. So I still want to be in sports, and it just somehow fit well that I can be some kind of like an assistant or some type of world inside of sports that they need, and that's that side of that therapy, medicine, chiropractic, all that.
Nice. So, you are a chiropractor, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the things that you've also learned is ART therapy. And I think you've done that for a long time. Can you explain what that is and how it works? I'm a big fan. I've been using it for, well, over a decade now. It's super helpful, but I find that a lot of people aren't aware of it.
Yeah. So ART, active release technique, it's a specialized soft tissue manipulation. So we all know that in order for us to move our joints, we need muscle, right? Muscle in some type of action, and it starts with the origin insertion, and you make a line, and that's the action or that the movement you're going to have in that joint. Well, there's multiple other muscles that do that type of action, but in different angles. So if you do like a little bit of like elbow flexion, you can have what they call a pronation, a rotation of the elbow and your forearm, and you can still do the same action. Well, it takes another different muscle to engage. Now, over a period of time, when you do like a repetitive motion, you create this like micro trauma. When the micro trauma occurs, you have this inflammatory process. Inflammation brings in fluid and also excess tissue and scar tissue material. So once you do the repetitive movement, this type of excess scar tissue, it's floating around there. It turns into glue, and it kind of glues on top of the other muscles. So now you have this like a muscle and maybe a fascia and a muscle, and they become as one because they're stuck on top of each other. And when you have a joint that have like several muscles do that action in different angles, and they become one, well, now you have a gross movement that may be irregular movement. So until you free up those independent muscles from its own individual actions, you'll start getting a little different biomechanics of that joint. Now you start thinking about like what's it going to lead to? Well, you're going to have that joint issue, like maybe osteoarthritis, because it's not setting correctly in that joint because the tissue is pulling it off that joint, and you're kind of grinding on the rim of the joint. So ART gets in there and it frees up each individual's muscles orientation to its action. So if it needs to go like an flexion and the other one goes in the pronation, well, there's two independent have to be moved off each other, because then if you keep it together, it acts as one and it just makes that joint operate incorrectly. So that's what ART is. ART, active release technique, it frees up those individual adhesions to have its own action.
Yeah, I learned about it from Tim Ferriss in the 4 Hour Body. And I don't have necessarily injuries, but what it's really been helpful for me is mobility and getting deeper into my movements and getting me more flexibility and control in being able to do that. And anytime I do have an injury, what I like is it's relatively a quick solution. It doesn't take forever to work. And it's not something that you have to keep doing, and there's no drugs and anything else. And you get relief much, much faster than with other types of treatments, is what I have found.
No, absolutely. Well, that's what ART is. ART, the treatment occurs at the end range of motion. So when your short limited range is like impeding by that adhesion or some type of restriction, well, ART will free that up. When you freeze it up, you get that increased range of motion, and then more importantly, you break up that adhesions that's restricting it.
Yeah, everything moves a lot easier.
Yeah.
And so I know it's worked for me. Now, you also got involved with sports medicine as well, right? Tampa Bay Bucks, Olympic athletes, and others. What was that like?
It was everything I wished for in my world. From as a kid, wanting to be in sports, and then switching over to being just a provider for athletes at every level opened up a lot of my wishes when I was a kid. So Luckily, I started off at UCLA in the athletic department, and that allowed me to become like the team doctor for like track and field. Then you get the football, then you get with girls soccer, then you start opening up to other sports, and you're seeing all different sports and their particular injuries. So that was fantastic. And the neat thing about these kids, since it's a high caliber collegiate program, they go in the pro world. Now you're going into like these professional teams, or most of them are like Olympians. So they're going to take you along to Olympic trials, world championships all around the world. So then you're taking care of them there. Then you go into, so now you're getting very familiar with a lot of individual sports and the particular injuries. Then you get to like other like professionals like WE when I started working with them, and those guys are very aggressively like beating themselves up. And the thing with them is that they don't have a season. It's a year-round event. There's no break. So they're constantly pounding on the body. So they need a lot of therapy to, keep them going for that period of time. Then I got with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and with that, it was very fast-paced world because of like in college, it was more so of the athlete and the well-rounded, collegiate athlete, mindset. Once you're in the pro world, now it's a business, it's a profession, and you have to make sure that these athletes are going into their best physical like appearance during a game without that adhesion or that apprehension to perform at that level. So there's a lot of like variables in there. So it's very aggressive with that world. So you saw that, and then you see like when you go through Olympic trials and all these. Now you're with one individual person versus a team, which is so much easier on me. But that also has its course of action with that too. So it was neat. I saw some very interesting things out there in all those realms of sports.
Curiosity, do they spend a lot of time on nutrition?
Yes and no. In college, that was back in 2005, 8, 10. So there was a dietitian and a nutritionist. There's that problem. But when it comes to these young kids, diet is very difficult. I mean, they just want to eat everything. Back then, your body doesn't. I mean, you're gonna do well as far as regenerating tissue. But once you get to that, plus 20s, 30s, when you start pushing that age up there, once you get to when I was at the Buccaneers, there was this guy named Kevin, awesome dietitian, nutritionist. So he had it dialed in well with particular like questions and everybody's like biometrics and understanding about how to like, fine tune their system to perform the best. But the thing is that there's like two seasons of every athlete. There's an on season, off season. So when it comes to football, on season is about caloric intake. You just get as much calorie in there, clean calories, and you're not worried about like proper like balance and supplements and nutrition. You're just looking at just high consumption because you're trying to get enough energy to recover and get going again. Because the turnover is fast, right? You play a game, you recover real fast, and you go again. So it doesn't seem like they concern themselves during a season with that component. Off season, it's very pronounced with diet, regenerative medicine, anything that helps them recover and get them back to square one. Because during the season, it's about once you get going, it's about sustaining as much as that 100% as possible without being like really off the field injury.
And that's important. Like you said, it's a business. And so that's what they're focused on. And everyone is replaceable, just kind of like in work.
Yeah, it is. It's very unique in the professional world, especially when it's like you said, there's only 53, spots on the NFL team, and it's one goes down, fill that one in, and it's a numbers game. As much as it should be about the athletes, it's ultimately about like fans winning game, playoffs, championship. It's that fine line. You care about the athlete, but then you look at the grand scheme of things. So it's a tough job for these general managers and these upper division type of like front office people that have to like balance that world of like let this guy go because of maybe prior injuries or there's a new guy coming in. So yeah, there's a lot of variables in there. Thank God I don't want to be involved with that. That sounds very difficult.
Are you still in the world of sports medicine or did you step out?
I'm stepping out of the hands-on with patients. Like I'll see occasionally like a professional athlete that comes see me and stuff. I'm not part of a team anymore. I don't get involved with that grand scheme of things. But I'm switching gears into a void that I see out there, and that is like regenerative medicine during the season. That's the difficulty is that during the season, there's not much of that protocols if you are injured. I mean, you're injured and the cycle is real fast. So you need to get back on the field. So that's why pain med is very pronounced. So when you hear about like injuries, they're doing, like anything to numb the area and you're able to play that week and continue on. So that's why when you hear about like stem cell therapy, regenerative medicine, it's always an off-season thing. So when I heard about that, I said, well, there's got to be something that you can do during the season. And that's why I started thinking that, well, what's the downfall of a stem cell? It's the injections that, doing the injection and the invasive type of procedure that you have that downtime. You lose a week or two of playing, and nobody wants to lose that from the injections. I started thinking about, well, there's got to be something else. And that's why I thought about a topical application. So that's how that all started up.
Nice. And you wrote a book about it, Regenerative Medicine's Future, Topical Stem Cell Potential. What inspired you to write the book?
Taking a step backwards. So
Yeah.
I developed a topical stem cell cream, right? So Regen. So the difficulty is when I start talking to people, especially other providers or anybody, they all know about stem cell therapy. They all heard about it. Said, hey, it helps you heal fast and stuff like that. And people think, well, it comes from something, and so they didn't really know where the sourcing comes from, or the word, or what's really going on with stem cells. So because of that, I had to write a book because I'm repeating these answers. I'm like, I need to put this on paper and just give the book to them. Here, read the book. You'll see it's a real short book. It's a fun read. There's a science component of it, and there's also the layman's version of it. And it's so simple to follow through and understand that in this layman's side of it, there's a guy named Jeff, and you can walk through Jeff's journey in discovering stem cell and how it evolved into the present and where it's going to go into the future.
Nice. And so it's more of an educational book for the basics of it. What I have found, because I have my own longevity protocols and so forth, and once you hit about 50, things start to change. Biochemically, your body changes, and the things that used to occur don't always occur, but they're maintainable. You can supplement into them. You can do different things. You can make sure you've got a good lifestyle to make sure that occurs. What have you noticed as people age?
Well, I'm that age, so 57. So I'm like a lab rat. So I know exactly what's going on. So you're talking to the person that we need to talk to. When I went through my age 50 plus, it's exactly what they say, right? Everything is a slower process of like after an exercise, you have to have longer kind of rest time or recovery time. I remember when I was like in my 20s in the military, you know how you're sitting in a chair and you can just get up and do a full sprint without stretching out. You can just go, right? No problem. Jumping off the back of trucks or somewhere, no big deal. Now it's like, we can do things. The problem is that we need to have that recovery period and to recover because, as we age, we start losing our adult stem cells, the ability to regenerate tissue. So we have it in our body, but we need to get it in some type of waking state because they go dormant. So we heard of these things called senescence or zombie cells. So these senescent cells are basically when you look at the chromosome, when you do like this RNA, DNA replication, and then you do this mitosis, cell division, and they make their actual tissue. Well, these cells go into the state of what they call senescence, where the RNA stops replicating into DNA because of that thing called telomeres. And we all know about telomeres. Telomeres, when they shorten, they basically stop the replication and it stops that mitosis cell division. So what we need to do is have a signal that turns that thing on, and maintaining that signaler would be great. And that signaler is telomerized, an enzyme. And we have in our body, we have to kind of move it from one side of our body to another, or we introduce it with a signal that this enzyme is in abundance from tissue called the Wharton's jelly, the umbilical cord. And there's other items you can get it from.
So you talked about umbilical cord. One of the biggest things, at least in the US and even across, is the sourcing of the stem cells, where they're coming from, the safety within it. I know in the US, I think there's limited places, but people will fly out of the country for these types of therapies. And it's kind of the wild, wild west. You don't know at all what you're getting, and you're messing with your body in ways that are probably not fully vetted.
Yeah. Here's the funny thing. So absolutely right. So right now the FDA is slowly ramping itself down and having more restrictions, and really like you need some kind of guidance. You need some safety mechanisms to help us as either patients or doctors, right? Because we don't know where these sources come from. We know that the lab is the FDA and they have some type of clearance. But as far as the sourcing, I mean, there are places out there where you hear some of the sourcing tissues are like vaginal tissue, and you'll hear even some like animal tissue. So there's that factor, right? So you have to really understand where that tissue is coming from, and then you have to have that the ability check and recheck. So that's one factor. And then moving out to like these other countries, here's the thing with them, they don't have the regulation. So when you do that and you're thinking about, well, you want to talk about not regulating, they're really not regulating. So you don't know what you're getting. The thing that they don't understand is that stem cell is not about these cells. They talk about these stem cells, and remember, when you look at cells, cells with a nucleus, and they also have their own DNA, and that DNA has, it's going to replicate into something. So if that tissue or that donor site, that little particular DNA is supposed to like code into a follicle, like a hair, and you put it into your like a ligament, and it starts making something, you don't know what it's going to mutate into. So you have that chance of tumor formation. Now, that's what people don't understand. It's not about the live cell, because you don't want live cells. You want what secretes. That secretion that you want is those EVs, extracellular vesicles. They're the cell-free molecules. The cell-free meaning there's no nucleus. It's just a signal. Just like how we have hormones. Hormones are basically just information that sends to a target tissue, say, do something. Same thing with these signalers that we're trying to obtain. So that's what this is all about. So when you go overseas and they say, I got 10 million live cells, well, I mean, okay, but what is it? What are the cells for, right? They say differentiate. It's going to basically signal. That's all it's doing, signaling your existing tissue to turn on.
One of the things I noticed in your book, you talked about plant stem cells. Are they useful for humans?
Yeah, so there's big research coming up right now. So it's really good. What you're looking at is signalers. So right now they're identifying these particular type of enzymes, cytokines, microRNAs. So there's signalers that really target our tissues, for instance, like a muscle cell. We want to engage the satellite cell. The satellite cell is that adult stem cells, the muscles that will turn into, divides, and it makes more myosin, more tissue muscle cells, right? So the goal with that is that these cells, as they go into like zombie state or senescence, they're going to have to be awake, right? So you have to entertain them with a enzyme called, telomerase, right? So as we go into that stuff. Now, when you start looking at all these signalers that are doing this job that we have from a donor side of human tissue, then you start comparing it to the research out there with botanicas, plant-based. And there are signalers similar to the ones that we are having in this tissue. So there's research out there coming out there. So absolutely. So the neat thing about that is that now you're looking at a sourcing where it's better, healthier, and 100%, there's no DNA. There's no like genetic coding that's going to turn into something in your body that you're putting into, right? So absolutely. So there's a lot of good research on that right now. So yeah, I'll give you a heads up later if we're talking a couple months about the next phase in this whole world. So I'll tell you more about that later.
What's coming?
Everything that you're talking about, you're right on right now. So you're doing a great job of understanding the whole industry of regenerative medicine.
Well, and even in the US, unfortunately, the cost of some of the practitioners is through the roof. They charge a hefty fee for longevity medicine. And they have these specialty clinics, and they're very beautiful and posh, but I just need health. I don't need a luxury 5-star event for it.
Yeah, it's incredible what they charge out there. I mean, I've heard of clinics charging $15,000 for 1 cc of stem cells, So it's very expensive. So I think the biggest cost, of course, is the overhead, beautification of the clinic, and then the provider, and all these things, right? So if you can get it in a form of a topical, that's fantastic. Now you can bypass all that clinical side of it and just get the actual cream and just apply it on your skin. So then you get the next step, which is what you're talking about, is the botanica, the plant-based. That's even more profitable. I apologize, not profitable, but more cost effective. So more cost effective. Now you're at a price point. It's a lot easier for anybody and everybody to get.
Is that something that people would do then on their own, or they would still go get, I mean, they may need a prescription, but then can they treat themselves, or is it you have to go into a place to get it?
Okay, so the first version with the human tissue, you have to get it by a provider. A provider, they basically dispense it out to the patients. But the botanica, no, you don't need a prescription. It goes right directly to consumer.
Okay, so that'll be a shift that's coming.
Yes.
Into the future. One of the terms that I've started to hear now, although I don't know how popular it is inflammaging. Can you explain what that is and kind of what's going on?
Inflammaging, it just, you hear the prefix words in there, right? So you got inflammation. So you're basically always inflaming your body, right? So it's all these precursors that basically give these signalers to start the actual inflammation process. The one thing that you want to think about is inflammation in the acute setting is necessary, but over time, you don't want a chronic scenario of inflammation, right? So that's where you start becoming into that world of excess tissue formation, more joint space of some type of excess fluid, and you're just going to get more restriction and more problem as you go into the recovery period.
That makes sense. And again, a lot of that I think is just what people are eating and what they're exposed to. Over it, that's the thing. It's the cause and the reaction isn't always immediate, right? It could be a very long time from when you start doing bad things to when you start seeing bad results in your body. Especially when you're young, you don't seem to notice them at all for a while. But these days people are getting sick with diseases that were never prevalent in young people before, and yet today they are.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, so there's two types of responses to food, right? You have the first one is pretty severe. You immediately identify it, and then you start saying you go into that inflammation of the anaphylactic shock and all that stuff, and you're worried about that peanut allergy that may kind of like occlude the actual breathing, right? But there's also the other side, which is that duration, right? So you identify these things as a chronic inflammatory response. Those are the food sensitivity. So you have the food allergies that give you immediate response, and then you have the chronic stuff where you give the sensitivity, and that might be delayed by 2-3 weeks. So there's special tests for that where you can get the food sensitivity, and then it's just a simple finger prick, and then you just take that test, and they'll identify these I think 400 foods where you have these signals called IgG, right? IgG gives you that chronic scenario of if you have a sensitivity to that particular food and that your body responds to it. Whereas IgE gives you the immediate response of that response.
That makes sense. Does any of your work center around looking at mitochondria and their reactions to all of this? Because it's something that, I mean, everybody knows about it, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of testing and research in how different things affect it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really get involved with the power plant of the cell,
Okay.
mitochondria. I'm mostly into the actual, like the signals that signals the existing tissue. So it's all those targeted tissues like, like satellite cells, chondrocyte, tenocytes, and stuff like that.
Okay. What do you see is the biggest issues that people could prevent if they would behave better or maybe knew better?
I think so. There's definitely the diet component. There's no doubt about that. You know that just like you talked about, inflammation is not what you want on your side as far as recovery. You want to get that stuff out of your body as quick as possible, right? So it's about arterial flow with the oxygenated blood. Then you got the venous flow, which is deoxygenated, the metabolic waste, and then the lymphatic system. You got to understand those three types of like carriers of deoxygenated, oxygenated, and then metabolic waste. You got to get things moving fast as possible. So when you understand that, you're thinking about how do I get this kind of like this factory of getting good stuff in and bad stuff up in a 1-to-1 ratio. You want to get it going, right? So when you understand that and how your body responds to things like exercise, and then when you understand about exercise, then you understand like how do I increase the diameter of my vessels to get more stuff out. Then you go into the world called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is that gas, right? That gas that helps you kind of like opens up those vessels. Then you have to ask yourself, how do I get nitric oxide increase? Then you think about greeny vegetable food, right? Then you look at nitrate, turns into nitrite, then it goes into nitric oxide. So there's their pathway. Then you got these enzymatic reactions, right? Then you got to look at these enzymes that can actually give your nitric oxide increase. And you got breathing. There's breathing way. You breathe through your nose and then your nasal cavities, you can make nitric oxide. So then you look at that. Now you're looking at your whole system. Now we want to look at exercise is a great piece. Now the problem with exercise is that we can't exercise as frequent as we were like 20 years old. So now we have to look at let's exercise, but we have to recover faster. Now, what helps us recover faster? Now we have to look at these other type of signalers that take our existing tissue, wakes them up, and regenerate and heals faster. So we can have that constant build, rebuild, breakdown, that cycle of just going back and forth. We're trying to build better tissue.
And it takes time and understanding for all of those things. Is there a particular thing that you look at with diet? I mean, diet's so vast and topics, and yet within it, I don't know how focused people get. And the reason I say that is because what I have noticed with the government's, setting their goals and what you're supposed to eat and what a lot of dietitians say, it's very basic and not helpful as you age?
I think the biggest thing that you want to look at, if you want to look at just the generic, like it makes things simple for everybody that wants to like figure out their diet, is when you buy something that's like I wouldn't say pre-ordered, but just like packaged, right? You want to look at the ingredients. If you see more than 14 lines, you've got yourself an issue here. So you gotta think like, wait a minute, what's all this stuff right here? Why is there so many chemicals in here? So that's probably the first thing. Processed food. I mean, that's the worst nemesis right there, right? So we have to look at that process. And then you want to think about the biggest thing that people really generically talk about, and that's omega 3s, right? Like fish oil, and then you look at like things like HDLs, high density lipids, healthy oils. You want to look at that. Those are the things that you want to. I always look at circulation is the basics for the transportation of that good stuff and the out of the bad stuff. And if you can get that fluid, just like a house, when you have a house that has poor pipes or poor sewer, well, you're going to have problems in the house. Just keep things clean. That's why I always think about if you're doing something that everybody's going to eat bad, right? So you might as well throw an olive oil in there, right? You better throw something, drown that whatever junk food, or put some olive oil on that thing. At least you'll have a little bit of 1-to-1 ratio of good and bad in there.
You don't have to. I mean, there are plenty of good foods. The problem is, even good food, as we call it, isn't what it used to be. Our meats aren't the same as they used to be. And even within oils, you're talking about olive oil versus using a lot of the other seed oils that are out there that people might not even think twice about, and yet they're not so good for us. Definitely a lot in that space.
Yeah. The funny thing about the olive oil, I don't know about this conspiracy, but when you see olive oil and you think, you see the word Italy, you think, oh, that's real olive oil. You got to watch out for that. That's not real olive oil. You heard the myth about, that little triad of engineering olive oil out of those other oils, like there's this canola oil, they'll mix it together. So that's what I would watch out for, is like just read the ingredients and the sourcing. If you see different locations, then it gives you a hint that it's not 100% really from olives. Everything has a trick. Just everything, you have to be very cautious of food these days. Especially, it's sad to say, America is like, it's not about nutrition, it's about profits. It's about money. It's one of those unique things about diet here, where the government tells you the generic pyramid, and the basic wheat and flour is number one. So, and we all know that that's the worst cause of diabetes here right now.
It is. And that's why I'm saying, we are told that that's good, but yet it's not good. And I don't even know if it's real wheat or some kind of genetically modified seed that created that wheat to begin with. And then you don't know what they put on it in spraying chemicals and everything while it's growing. So there's all of these different things that make it difficult to truly know what you're getting and to be able to make better choices out there.
Yeah. The funny thing is that you ever see those like warnings for food that exclude like pregnant people? Like they said, don't eat this, don't eat that. And it's a lot of food that pregnant people can't eat. But the minute they deliver the baby, you go back and eat that food. I'm like, well, I don't understand. Did it stop being its toxicity, during your pregnancy, and then all of a sudden now it's neutralized? It's still toxic. It's still bad for us.
It is. I know you mentioned nitric oxide, and it's funny. I was recently at a conference, and they had some vendor there was like testing everybody for nitric oxide with test strips. And so I'm like, sure, test me, whatever. I'm being nice, And they're like, yours is good. I'm like, yeah, and they're like, that's weird. Like they couldn't believe that I didn't need a supplement or something for it. And again, it's just eating healthy and being good with it. I don't know how big a deal it is, but they seem to make it from their tests that most people aren't.
You'd be amazed of that problem that a lot of people in their 50s have. I mean, the first sign of males is, ED. That's the first sign of you having nitric oxide deficiency or a poor functioning type of release of nitric oxide. So when you start seeing those side effects of that poor function, then you know that it's going to play havoc on, arteries, and then the real blood vessels in around the heart, and then you'll start seeing that kind of problem, like strokes and cardiac arrest
and everything else. And I know they talk a lot about testosterone for males. I haven't studied it because I don't have the issue, but it's my understanding if you take exogenous testosterone, your body stops producing its own. And so it causes a reaction that you probably don't want.
No, I think the biggest thing that you like test. I'm not really an expert when it comes to hormones of that, that
Right.
TRT world, but I do know that when you start taking a testosterone replacement, right? Your testosterone, because your body, somewhere it performs that type of function, right? But as you take in that injection or that the testosterone, your levels drop down because you don't need to produce that much because your levels are now back to normal. But the weird thing about that is that as the testosterone, because of that, that introduction to your body gets increased, well, the next thing that increases is your estrogen production. So then they call it cycle off, you can cycle off testosterone where your estrogen level is high. That's why you hear people that, that take testosterone for a long period of time, they have that female characteristics in their body because of the estrogen formation from that testosterone increase, and then you stop that, and then the estrogen dominates from that point on.
And they don't tell you that. You mentioned lymphatic, and that's an area that I don't think a lot of people pay attention to is the lymphatic system and how do you achieve movement in it. I've started using those compression machines where you go sit inside and they compress your legs and they supposedly get the lymphatic system moving. I don't know if you have any experience in that space.
Well, so in the sports world, there's a device called Normatec. It's like
Yeah,
these,
that's what I use.
yeah, it's a booth, right?
Yeah.
So the booth, they're fine. It's just that if you do have like that's a great, like, for a healthy person, it's good. But when you have someone that has an obstruction in the lymphatic system, you have to figure out what's obstructing it. So it's about the dilation of those vessels. There's some that don't increase or they're very narrow, and there's things blocking behind it, and you get that lymphatic sign down your lower extremity swelling up. So the big thing with that is that you've got to figure out what type of like obstruction you're having. Is it part of like the inflammatory from a post workout? You're got that the DOMS, the delayed onset muscle soreness, or is it from something that obstructing in your inguinal area or somewhere that's kind of like stopping the extremities to get the excess weight out there? When you figure that out, then you have to say, all right, is it blockage because of the vessels not dilating? Well, maybe my diet has something to do with it. Is it because I'm not moving? Because movement helps that system moves back and forth. You got to get that fluidity right. Is it maybe I'm standing on my legs too much and I don't have that calf strength to pump it back out? So it's a lot of factors. So one big thing that helps out the actual lymphatic system is a vibration plate, a whole body vibration plate, like a device called power plate. A
Hmm.
power plate in its percussion and its triplanar motion helps increase that mobility of the lymphatic system move because it gets stagnant, and it helps it kind of open up that vessels with activation of nitric oxide, and then it allows that fluid to fly through.
Is it just the vibration that does it, or is there something more than just vibration?
Yeah, so the vibration does that cascade of, and when you do a vibration plate, you're doing that shearing, right? So you look at the epithelium, right, of the tissue, so the vessels of the artery, veins, and lymphatic system. So you have a thing called shearing, where the vessels are going up and down. Like if you're walking or running, it's shearing back and forth. Well, it sets that cascade of nitric oxide production. So there is a process where you'll start seeing the nitric oxide get released, and it goes around the vessels, and the vessel dilates and opens up these vessels. And that's what you're trying to do, is mimic exercising without the world exercise, like running or walking fast.
All right. I do red light therapy, and that machine also has a vibration plate in it. So I figure, well, I'm here. You might as well do that too.
Yeah. But don't
And it
forget, like,
works.
yeah, photobiomodulation does release nitric oxide too. So there's those two they're great. One vibration and one does the actual activation with the red light therapy.
A little bit of everything. You know, we didn't ask about this, but the topical product that you have, Regen, what are people generally using it for? Like what's the condition that they come and say I need help with?
So I started that off with sports related injuries. So anybody that have like sprained ankles or just something that they just want to continue on playing, but they also want to heal instead of doing the injection. Just let's say you sprain your ankle. So when you sprain your ankle, you apply it on your ankle, and then you do your own protocol, decreases inflammation and all that stuff. But it allows you to do the most important thing is that it allows you to continue on playing with that therapy or the regenerative medicine therapy going. So it has the components where it can go through the skin, and then it signals your existing tissue to turn on and to regenerate tissue. Then it goes into the world of osteoarthritis. So when you have like those age-related joint problems, when you're losing that cartilage, well, the only way to grow that cartilage back in there is that you need to signal those chondrocytes to turn on to make more cartilage size. So again, that's that signal inside of Regen or Wharton's jelly umbilical cord that's in that topical.
So those are the two main areas then that people use it.
Yeah, repetitive injuries and sports-related injuries, mostly musculoskeletal. But that's in my world because I'm a sports guy. But when you look at other people, there are things that I know that people skin especially is a big thing. But the problem with my topical is that I have a transdermal agent in there, and that transdermal agent pulls it right through the skin, so it bypasses skin. So that's why we are looking at target tissues of like the tendon, ligament, muscles, cartilage, and bone. But there's big things on skin for the cosmetic side of it. Some people, I know there's some clinics out there trying to do for the hair. The problem with hair, it's not so much the stem cell, it's that hormone, right? DHT, right? Dihydrogen testosterone, right? That's what the problem is. We have too much excess of that hormone that's a byproduct of testosterone. So that's why you have these like Rogaine that inhibits that DHT. When I hear about stem cell and regrowth of hair, it's a catch-22 because you still have that hormone, that DHT that's really having the cause of the hair loss. So I don't think it's there yet for that particular problem.
So there's so many things going on. There's so many therapies available. How do you know what's real? And how do you figure it all out? Because it can be very overwhelming.
Yeah, especially when you're in the world of injection, there's that factor of what am I injecting, right? Who am I trusting? Where is this sourcing from? So that's one thing. Now you can ask your clinic or your clinician for like sourcing. You can get the FDA licensing. You can do a little research at the laboratory that's doing this tissue donation. So there's that side of it. As far as what you could do personally, it's difficult, right? It's just like a pharmaceutical drug, right? You don't know. But the thing with pharmaceutical drug is regulated by the FDA, whereas stem cell therapy, it's not regulated right now. So it's the wild, wild west. So you don't know. So where I see the future of where it's going is, of course, it's topical. But where it's going to go, it's got to go to the OTC world. OTC is still regulated by the actual FDA, but it's in the over the counter. Over the counter is now readily available to everybody, as simple as Tylenol or aspirin or a topical like icy hot or something like that. So that's where I see the future. So now the FDA is observing and monitoring what's in these ingredients, whereas you do the injections, you don't know what's going on here. So yeah, absolutely, it's a catch-22 in that world of like figuring out what you want, and then do I really need it? Of course I need it, but do I trust it? Well, I need it. So your only option is surgery. You don't want to do surgery, so like, what am I doing? Like, I get that it's difficult, and that's why you see a lot of clinics closing down, these laboratories closing down because the FDA is really coming down these guys.
Beyond what we've talked about, is there anything else that we should cover to help people live a healthier, more active lifestyle?
Exercise. That is the biggest thing I feel. Diet is number two because exercise, it's about your joint. Your joint needs that movement. And then don't forget, our cells, we recycle our cells. Our cells die and they regenerate, right? As we get older, they slow that process down. But you still have to get that tissue to break down so you build up bigger and stronger. So I always say exercise number one because the joint likes movement. It likes that fluidity. That synovial fluid inside that joint needs that pressure, positive, negative gradient to get that fluid fluctuating in and out, to get the bad out and the good in, right? Then, the next one is diet. Know what you're eating. Just think about it. Would you feed this to a pregnant woman? No, then why would you eat it, right? Just look at that kind of like analogy. And I think those are the secrets. And then listen to podcasts like this. Listen to people that are doing stuff that really are increasing their active lifespan. I really want to like see the future of an active person instead of like, I just want to live to 100 and who cares how I'm living it. No, you want to think about, I want to still be able to walk, travel at 100, and then see where all this like technology is going to go. Would that be wonderful to see it in 50 years? Like, holy cow, man, the way it's moving so fast now.
Is living a healthy, active lifestyle at 100 easily doable?
If you're very diligent in a lot of things, yes, I think so. I think
Okay.
if you understand about your genetic makeup, you understand about your family history. You understand if you have a history of diabetes, or diabetes itself is just complicated by itself. So, and then you understand that the only thing that combats diabetes type 2 is you got to burn the sugar out of the blood. And how do you do that? Well, you can take a drug or you can exercise. Remember, glucose is just a gasoline. And what we do with our body, we use that gasoline and it gets out of your bloodstream. So if you understand those components in your body and then use the knowledge that are out there to help you battle that, absolutely you can do that.
What
I'm looking forward to that.
I am too. That's why I take all those things and do all these things and constantly keep in touch and figure out what's going on and do things to prevent harm and also to be aware of what is happening in the body. So I put my time, effort, and money behind it. When you say exercise, are you thinking like weightlifting, free weights? Is it more just whatever? Or
It's the level of who you are. If you were I worked out all my life, so there's always that component of, weightlifting with weights, but that's one side of it. Then you have to do the cardiovascular. And then I use a thing called the power plate, the vibration plate. So I put those three together. So I enjoy the compression of the weights. I don't do that one max rep and try to max out everything, but
no?
I like to load and I like to feel that pressure in my body, and it just introduced my body because your body needs that pressure, right? The more pressure you put on your body, it lays down more tissue, and that means bone, muscle to combat that pressure. And then when you call it cardiovascular, then you look at like some type of running, biking, just to get that heart rate at close to like 80% of the heart rate max, and then just hold it for 20, 30 minutes and just kind of feel it there for a while so your body stresses out, and then recover from that. Learn how to recover from push. And then the vibration, well, that's a simple recovery tool for me. I just want to increase the vasodilation with the activation nitric oxide.
And I don't know if people realize, but like when you lift heavy weights, your bones actually become stronger. It sets off that whole cascade. So again, for people with osteopenia or bone density issues, weightlifting is a natural way that you don't have to take all those drugs and do all that stuff to build your bones back up.
I think the best example of that is when astronauts go into space and there's not that pressure, they come back and you hear about bone density loss up to like 10, 15, 20%. So absolutely, just feel it once in a while. Like if you can just feel that pressure of that whole body compression, either like a leg press or something, and just try to just feel it maybe once every 2 weeks. Just feel it, and then your body will say, okay, I don't like this feeling. Let me lay down more tissue, bone, muscle to combat that.
And I think that's what people don't realize. It doesn't take a lot. It takes a little concerted effort to actually achieve these results. You don't have to go crazy.
You don't have to go crazy. Not this age. This is not the time to go crazy,
I totally agree with you. What's one truth about success you wish more people understood?
Never quit. Never quit. Think about if you can understand that if you never quit on a project, you never lose. You'll never lose. You can always say, I'm in progress. I'm in work in progress, right? So I always find myself, in a winning circle because I never quit. Quitting is not my thing. I'll keep going. I'll take it down to the bottom of the ocean. I'm gonna keep on moving that thing. That's one secret that I wish everybody knew: is never quit.
Yeah, you haven't achieved it yet, right? You
Yeah,
just keep going.
just keep going.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Trusting my inner voice a little bit more. That's the big thing. Your gut instinct is good. Opinions out there are good, but you've got to be careful what opinions and who the source, right? So that's the big thing. And then just really like think about like, is this for me? Don't be so like impulsive in your decision. So I was very impulsive. I'll do this, I'll do that, and not listen to my inner voice. Like think like, wait a minute, slow down. And then by the time I started having that thought, the process started. So I thought, oh, so I think that was my biggest thing right there.
Makes sense. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
There are times that you'll see adversity, and then right before you break through, you'll quit. Don't ever quit. I have to go back to that old, that old don't quit. I just remember the reason why I say that because I remember when I was in high school, I was a sports, you know, typical ABC after school special, having a hard time. I'm an Asian, parents are from another country, I'm in America, we got that kind of like that social differences, and I'm angry, and then that happened. So quitting, I think that's why I really emphasize on not quitting, because I know what it feels like to be one of those, I know what it feels like to quit and make excuses like, oh, yeah, I did it because of that. And if I just would have hung in there and just pushed through, I would have popped through and I goes, okay, success. So for you 18-year-olds, just remember, it's tough right now. Just keep going. You'll get through it. And then you'll look back, goes, that wasn't so bad. And then you'll build a thick, strong, self-confident person from that point on. Just get through the first one.
Success isn't that far away from where people quit.
So interesting, especially my age. I look back, I'm like, oh, you almost had it. And then when you give them advice, it doesn't do well. You have to give your own advice. You have to see it for yourself where you say, I did it. And it's so much better in that taste when you can say, completion done by my process.
So true. If people would like to learn more about you, get a copy of the book, learn more about the products, how do they do that?
You can go on my website. It's www.regen.com, and you can read about Regen and the product. Also, the book is on Amazon, and then it's The Future of Regenerative Medicine, and then just type my name after that, Dr. Rhee, Rhee, and it should pop up. And then if you need to get a hold of me, just there's info on my website. Just do the info at Regen, and then ask me a question.
Cool. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I really appreciate that, Rocky. Thank you very much.
Thanks for checking out this unedited video of the Richer Soul podcast. You can find the full episode along with all the back episodes at richersoul.com. This podcast is brought to you by Profit Comes First, where we help business owners to have a more profitable and growing business so they can live the life of their dreams. Check that out as well wherever you listen to all this content.